Hello everybody and welcome to another Cycle Frontier video. Today we'll be talking about the materials tier list, or the mat tier list. That's a bad joke. So what is this exactly? So one of the things that has come up a lot in stream is basically understanding what is the difference in the materials. What am I looking at? What am I picking up? Stuff like that. So hopefully this video will be your one-stop shop when it comes to understanding what all the materials do and really what they're going to be for. Let's quickly go over the tier list that I have here so you understand what we're looking at. Starting from the bottom, we'll start at KMark fodder. Super easy to understand. Just sell the stuff. It's not really used for anything, and if it is, it's not even useful stuff. Just sell it. It'll be better. Used for base once. What does that mean? Pretty simple as well. It's going to be used in your player quarters maybe about once or twice, and past that, then it becomes KMark fodder. It's not really used in any contracts, so you just move on. High level but low use. This is stuff like the Crusher Head. Things that are going to be difficult to find, but have a good payout if you can get the item back into your stash. So, for example, again, the Crusher Head is used in the purple gear. Everyone wants purple gear. Moving on, we've got useful but a pain to find. These are objects that are going to be consistently useful throughout your entire playthrough, throughout the entire season, but at their core, they are meant to be difficult to find. Moving on, we've got useful and easy to find. Same sort of concept as T4, as we just said, but these are going to be items that are necessary for certain objects, but they're not going to be in the T1 of necessary and useful and should pick up, and we'll explain that in just a hot second. So T3 are going to be these useful items that you'll see all around. You're going to want to pick them up. But at the end of the day, they're only going to be used for certain contracts or certain things, whether that be contracts, crafting, or base building. Moving on, we've got necessary but a pain. These are items that you're desperately going to want throughout the entire season or during specific parts of the season, so you're going to kind of want to hoard them, but they are difficult to find, like the Smart Mesh. Finally, we have necessary, useful, and you should pick up. These are items that you will find throughout the entire time you are playing, whether it be off the ground or off a dead player or off your dead friend if you decide to go that route. But these are things that you're going to consistently want to pick up because they are going to be used in all three, whether it be contracts, whether it be crafting, whether it be for your player quarters, you're going to want it. So, without further ado, let's just get right into it, starting with KMark fodder. So KMark fodder has 5 or so, items in there. Before we continue as well, I also want to make everybody know that this tier list is based off of my own personal experience with the game, as well. The basic boilerplate disclaimer is necessary. This is everything and only information from the beta that we've been playing for the past month. This is not necessarily what will be the case in the full release. When the full release comes out, I'll take some time to, do work, and I will update the tier list from there. But let's continue on with the K-Marks. So you've got the 2 flesh. You've got the Crusher flesh and the Marauder flesh, respectively. Why are they in KMark fodder? It's because they're pretty much used in one crafting item, and it's health consumables. But the reality is you come across health consumables so often, you don't need them. Right? You can just get cheaper and pretty much the same thing from Osiris level 6. Next, you've got jewelry and old medicine. The reason I'm talking about both of them at the same time is they are specifically designed to be sold. Jewelry gets you K-marks. Old medicine gets you faction XP. Old medicine is super useful at low levels. And the reason for that is it gives 30 faction XP. It's awesome. I highly recommend storing and just keeping it as much as you can. Plus, it's only a weight of 1, so you can just throw that right into your safety pocket and move on. Jewelry, same concept, but it's used for K-marks. Next, we come up to the batteries. I'll be real honest with you guys. I haven't actually found any real use for the batteries. I don't know if they're actually used in the base or not, but I just sell all of the batteries. At this point, they're useless. You just get rid of them, keep moving. Finally, we come across old currency. Now, old currency is interesting because it's actually used in higher level ICA missions or contracts. But the reality is old currency is pretty much used as a one-to-one transfer. So 10,000 old currency gives you 10,000 KMarks. Doesn't give you any faction XP though. But it's a really good thing to hoard in case you're just having a bad couple of runs and you don't have much money left. You just turn in all your old currency and now you have money again. Move on. So all the items here are going to be used in base once. I'm going to kind of just run through these pretty quickly, as the basic tier list itself and the basic understanding what that tier list is pretty self-explanatory, but I am going to go through each one so then you can also see a larger photo of what the object looks like, because I know this is a little small. So starting from the left, we'll start with the Rattler Eyes. Rattler Eyes you get from killing Rattlers. They drop semi-frequently. I've only seen them used in the base once or twice. Past that, KMark fodder. Boom. The old circuitry, again, same concept. You can find them throughout ICA buildings is what I've been able to find. But once you get that going, once you use all the stuff for the base that you need it for, it's used specifically, I remember, for upgrading your base to level 4, if I remember properly. Bam, done. Kotek, what is that? Kotek Tools. I was about to say Kotek Weapons. Kotek Tools. Same concept as the last two. It's used once or twice in the higher tier for the base or the quarters. Once you got that, boom, KMark fodder. Fertilizer and the knockoff Snickers bar, or the Twinkle bar as I think it's called. The fertilizer is used to upgrade your base once. I haven't seen it used since. The Twinkle bar as well, it's used for just some random upgrade once you're done. Bam, KMark fodder. Moving forward, you got the resin gun. Resin gun, once again, you can find it all over the place. If you're not looking for it, you're definitely going to find it. If you are looking for it, tough, because you're never going to find it. Same concept. You can find it all around in all sorts of different chests. It's used once or twice in the higher end upgrades for the base quarter. Once you're done with that, bam, KMark fodder. Move on. Electric cables. Now, these you will find all over the place, specifically in like ICA areas. If you're playing a lot on Bright Sands, I highly recommend Power Plant. You'll find these all the time. Again, same concept as everything before. It's used once or twice in the base. Bam, KMark fodder. Move on. Radio equipment and the, I can't remember what the little cylinder is called, so we'll call it the metal cylinder. They are also used just a couple of times in the base upgrades. Once that's done, bam, bam, KMark fodder. Moving on. We've got the DNA sampler, and then the personal fan favorite, the melon. I love saying it, melon. So the DNA sampler is actually a little bit more difficult to find. So if you do find it, you should hold on to it until it's necessary for the base. It's one of those items that aren't super useful, but are a little bit difficult to find. So I wouldn't bam KMark fodder that immediately. I would hold on to it. Same kind of goes for the melon a little bit. They're called the alien fruit, but melon. Plus, it's fun to say. You should do it. But with that in mind, again, it's used more in actually the earlier stages of the base upgrade. I haven't seen them used in the higher tier. So once you've got that kind of first base done, bam, KMark fodder. And that's pretty much it for use for base once. We'll just move right along to the more entertaining stuff. High level but low use. These items are basically, as they say, they're hard to find. They're difficult to acquire. That was dumb. That's the same thing twice. But as I said, yeah, they're hard to find, but they're going to be used in higher level items, whether that be high tier weapons, high tier armor, or they're used in the purple attachments that you can craft. All of these items, minus the data drive, which we'll get into in a hot second, are used for high-end items. And you'll understand why the data drive is used there. So let's start with the Crusher Head. So Crusher Head and the Crusher Hide, respectively, those are all used for the purple armor that you can craft. Just get them. Get them. If you can get them, get them. They don't drop 100% of the time on the Crusher, though. That's kind of the important thing. Crusher can be difficult to kill if you're a solo player. If you do have the right gear and the right squad, it's easy to kill. And hopefully you guys can run through a couple of Crushers to each get a head and some hide to make the armor that you want. Moving on, we've got the portable lab. So Here's the thing about the portable lab. The portable lab is used in a couple of different base building upgrades. The reason I didn't put it in used for base once is because they are so difficult to find. In my 20 plus hours of playing the game, probably more, probably like 30 plus hours of playing the game, I'll be honest, I think I found maybe 4. Maybe. So that's why I put it in this tier rather than in used for base once. I would never recommend, bam, KMark foddering it. That's just fun to do now. I would never recommend using it for KMark fodder. I would always hold on to it as well. You could probably use it as a trade with a player. Like while you're down, they might be like, "Hey, do you have any of this?" And you can be like, "Yeah, I do. Do you have any smart mesh?" Because you're always going to want smart mesh. Moving on, we've got the data drive. Now, the reason the data drive is in high level but low use is pretty simple. And the reality is that the data drive is used for one thing and one thing only so far, and it's only used in ICA missions. Once you hit the higher tier stuff, once you're consistently doing the hard mission, you're going to be needing valuable and unique data drives, which are the purple and orange data drives, respectively. To get an orange data drive starting at the white data drive, it is 5 minutes. It requires you to stay 5 minutes at one of the uplinks that makes loud noise that, in all honesty, is a beacon for players to say, "Hi, come and shoot me." Now, you could use it as bait if you wanted, but that's not really the reality is it's high level because it gives you a lot of XP through the contract. That being said, it only does have one use, so that's why. Next, we've got the Meteor Core and the Meteor Fragments. Both of these, if you've been playing on Fortuna 3 for any amount of time, you'll have noticed the meteors falling from the sky. This is where you get these items. You go to where the crash site is. If you go to the big meteor in the center, keep busting that open with the pick of yours, you'll find the Meteor Core. The Meteor Fragments are all strewn out around the side. Both of these are used in Korolev contracts as well as they are used in the creation of higher level items, including I believe the Zeus Beam the Karma requires the Meteor Core. So definitely stuff you want to hold on to. If you kill a player and you see that they have a Meteor Core in their backpack, you take that and you run. You get to evac and call it a good old day. Next, we've got the Veltasite Heart. Now, the Veltasite Heart is going to be difficult to find. I'll be honest, as I said, I've been playing something like, 30 plus hours? I have yet to find a Veltasite Heart. Just can't find one. Simple as that. Veltasite Hearts are found just by mining normal Veltasite ore veins. That's about it. But they're also super useful because they're used in the Zeus Beam, as well as I believe they are even used in purple armor, but I might be wrong. It might be pure that's used in... I am wrong. As I'm saying that, I recognize I am wrong. The Veltasite Hearts are used specifically in the high-tier weapons that you need to craft, and as well in Korolev missions. Finally, the last item on this tier is the Dust Bloom Flower, or the Desert Flower, as it's more easily known as. And the reason it's called this is you can only find it on Crescent Falls, and you can only find it in the most northern part of the map where the desert is. This is a super dangerous area to be because there is only one entrance and one exit from the location. You might be able to glitch your way through and find a secondary exit. The reality is there is only one made exit and one made entrance, if that makes any semblance of sense to you. And you can only get it from this one area. This item specifically is used in the creation of the high-level purple backpack, if I remember properly. As well, it might also be used in the purple armor. Moving on. We've got stuff that are useful but a pain to find. What does this mean for you guys? What this means is that these are items that you are going to want to basically hoard if you can. And they are going to be used in crafting. They are going to be used in contracts. And they are going to be used in sometimes base, but I haven't found that as of yet. Mostly it's contracts and crafting. But the reality is they are hard to find, or they are kind of a pain to find. So we'll start from the left. Let's start with the blue runner egg. Now, if you've ever had to find the blue runner egg, you know it's difficult to find because you have to follow the tracks. Sometimes you get to the nest and the nest has already been looted. Is what it is. So you just kind of have to suck it up. Moving on, we have the charged spinal base. Now, the charged spinal base, if you don't know this, you can only get it from killing a mob during a cycle storm. That is the only way you can get charged spinal bases. These are specifically used in base upgrades at the higher tier. It's specifically used in inventory, if I remember properly, and generators. So you're definitely going to want it. The Marauder Head is also very necessary because it is used in armor creation as well. The problem with the Marauder Head, or Jeff Head, whatever you want to call it, is the fact that you gotta kill a Jeff. And if you're a nooblet running nooblet gear, you ain't gonna be killing a Jeff. It's just not gonna happen. I'm sorry. You can try, but it's just not gonna happen. You either run out of ammo or you're gonna get killed, whether that be from the Jeff or another player. I don't know. You tell me. So keep that in mind. Once you get to higher level weapons, then you'll be able to take on Jeffs like it's no tomorrow. Moving on to the next three. We've got the autoloader, the master CPU unit, and the gyroscope. The reason I'm clumping all of these three together is because these are all rare purple items that you can find strewn throughout the map in very, very low quantities and very low rarity, but they're all going to be used for contracts. Definitely want them. If you find them, pick them up, especially gyroscopes. I have only found one gyroscope. In my 30 hours of playing, I've only found one gyroscope. Pick them up and get out. Put them in your safe pocket if you have the space. Moving on, we've got the next two Velticites. We've got the pure Velticite and the clear Velticite. Both of these are... You could make an argument that the clear Velticite is actually easy to find. I'm keeping it in the tier that it is right now, simply out of the fact that I don't believe it's meant to be as easy to find as it is. And if it is supposed to be that easy, then I'll move it around. But as of right now, I don't think it's meant to be as easy as it is because it's used in the creation of blue armor, and then the pure Velticite is used in the creation of purple armor. Keeping in mind as well, clear and pure Velticite are both used in contracts higher level. Boom, boom, boom. Moving on. We're just getting everything. We've got, finally in the last of this tier, the charged bright caps. The charged bright caps, much like the charged spinal bases, are a lot harder to find because you have to get to a bright cap during a storm. So not only are you dodging lightning, probably dodging mobs, and if you're really unlucky, dodging other players, you gotta then go to a swamp area where there are bright caps, and then pick the bright cap. Once the storm ends, though, it's important to note that once the storm ends, those charged bright caps go away, so you have to get them during the storm, or at least that's been my, situation up until now. Moving on, we've got the useful and easy to find items. Now, all of these items are relatively common to find. Some of them you can argue would go into necessary, useful, and should pick up. One of those being the nuclear core, or the mini nuke. I'm keeping it where it is right now, and I'll explain when we get there, but I'm keeping all of these where they are right now, and we'll explain why when we get to each one. Starting with the Strider Flesh and Strider Head. You know what? No, let's split these. Let's start with the Strider Flesh. So Strider Flesh is super useful in the beginning of the game. You need it for a bunch of the early inventory upgrades, which you absolutely should be doing, by the way. You need that inventory. But afterwards, it's not that useful anymore. So then you can just, boom, KMark fodder it. Moving on, you've got the Strider Head. The Strider Head is pretty easy to find. It drops semi-regularly to a point where you're like, oh, look, there's another Strider Head. Woo! But at the same time, you do want to be picking these up because they are used specifically in the green helmet crafting. And if you know the difference between the white helmet and the green helmet, it is a big upgrade. I highly recommend it. Always have a stash of like 5 Strider Heads on your person or in your stash. That way you can make the green helmets as necessary. Moving on, we've got the Azure Bark, the zero CPU, the zero CPU unit, and the interactive screen. The reason I'm clumping all of these together is because the magnetic stabilizer is its own thing, so we're just going to clump these and move on. All of these are super useful in contracts. Very rarely, if at all, are they used in crafting, and I don't think they're used too much in the creation of the base, but they are used quite often in the contracts. specifically ICA. The zero CPU unit is used quite a bit in Korolev as well, but all three of these are used in contracts pretty regularly. Always recommend picking them up when you come across them. Now, the magnetic stabilizer. This one's a little weird because you're typically going to be using it in stash contracts. Stash contracts are when you have to take a item and go to a dead drop and then deposit it there. This item is used for those missions a lot. So it's important to know when you have those missions so that you know to take them in, or if you already have the mission, you can go to locations, find them, and then drop them off in the dead drop. So they're going to be necessary for these contracts, but besides that, they haven't had too much use otherwise. Moving on, we've got the little mini nuke, the nuclear reactor, the nuclear core, whatever it's called. I call it the mini nuke. These can only be found in battery rooms. I think there's one or two places that they might spawn as well, but it's super infrequent, so it's not useful for this for this tier list. The reason I've put it in useful, in easy to find, and not necessary useful and should pick up is because even though you know exactly where to find the objects, just because you find them there doesn't mean someone hasn't already completed the puzzle. And if someone's completed the puzzle, it does take a little while for that puzzle to reset. Thus, I'm keeping it in T3 rather than putting it in T1, where you could make an argument for it to exist. As well, the little mini nukes are used pretty primarily in the completion of contracts, but it is used as well in crafting, and I believe one or two base upgrades. But don't quote me on that. Next, we're going to move on to optical glass. We'll just start with optical glass. So optical glass is one of those weird ones where you're going to find it pretty common, but it's only used in contracts and maybe one or two base upgrades. It's not really used in attachment creation. I'd have a stash of about 10 of them. Past that, boom, KMark fodder. Moving on. We now have the polymetallic prefabricate, not polyamorous, rumble. Polymetallic prefabricate. This is a super, super useful item in the beginning of the game. It's used in a bunch of your upgrades. It's used in a bunch of your quests. As you progress through the season, though, it's not as useful, let's say. It's still necessary for a couple of upgrades in the quarters here and there, but when it comes to the grand scheme of doing your contracts, it's not as necessary. That's why it's not put in T1. The same concept actually goes for the hardened metals, which is next. Used quite often in the beginning of the game, in the beginning of the season. As time goes on, though, not so much. Moving on, we've got the medical supplies. Now, the medical supplies are super useful, not super easy to find. The reason I've put it in the useful and easy to find and not useful but a pain to find is because of where they spawn. Medical supplies can pretty much spawn anywhere medical items or consumables can be found. The reason this item is so useful is because it's used in the creation of restoration armor, whether that be the blue or the green armor. I haven't seen them used in contracts or even base upgrades. Doesn't mean there aren't, especially for base upgrades. But from what I can tell, it's really only used in the restoration armor creation. I would highly recommend picking them up. I'd probably have a stash of about 10 at all times if you. Moving on, we've got the Focus Crystal and the Titan Ore. Now, I'm, again, lumping these together because they're both mineable items, but they are used specifically in contracts. Both the Focus Crystal and the Titan Ore are used in mostly just contracts. I haven't seen them used in base upgrades, and I definitely haven't seen them used in attachments. I could be wrong. I only use very specific weapons. So if I'm wrong, please tell me. I have no issue being wrong sometimes. But in regards to this tier list, it's pretty much just used for contracts. Hold on to them. You definitely always want to hold on to them because the contracts require so much. But in the grand scheme of things, do not KMark fodder them. Moving on, we've got the last two Velticites, Flawless and Cloudy. Now, here's the thing about Flawless. Flawless Velticite, or not flawless, flawed Velticite, you will find everywhere because you're going to be mining for Velticite to get your pure, clear, and Velticite hearts. because you're killing players. The reality is you're always going to have flawed belt. It's not necessary or useful, and I've only seen it used in early Korolev missions. So, you know, it's going to be dummy easy to find. Cloudy Veltocite, kind of in that same boat as Flawed Veltocite. You're always going to find it, and it's really only used in contracts. I believe it might actually be used a little bit in the creation of green armor, but, you know, I'd have to check that first, or you'd have to say one way or the other. But Cloudy Veltocite, you want to hold on to a bit more. Flawed Veltocite, you know, keep a stack of like 10 or 15, and the rest, boom, KMark fodder. Finally, we've got the last three plants. We've got bright caps, we've got the ivy flower, and we've got the water filament plant. I know I pronounced that wrong. I'm very sorry. What are these? So starting with the bright caps, these can only be found in the swamps. The reason they're not in T1 is because they can be so difficult to find. Oh, difficult to find. If a player runs through a swamp picking up all the bright caps, it's going to take forever for them to respawn. So now you're kind of left high and dry, and you got nothing. What? It happens. But it's still going to always be necessary to pick up because it is used in crafting, and more specifically, it is used in Osiris missions. It's used a lot in Osiris missions. So always, always, always pick up bright caps when you can. You never know when you're going to need it. When it comes to the ivy flower and the waterweed filament flower, which I still think I pronounced that wrong, you're going to find them pretty common. The ivy flower is a little bit more difficult to find if you're not paying attention to it. You want to be looking for vines on buildings specifically, and then you'll see the little flower there. The waterweed filament is found near water. Both are going to be used for contracts. I haven't seen them used in anything else besides contract. That's not true, actually. I'm lying. The waterweed filament has been used in a couple of the base upgrades. Always sort of pick them up when you come across them, because especially with the ivy flower, I believe it can give a good amount of KMarks if you have a good stack. So at most, boom, KMark fodder. Moving on. These are items that you are going to use throughout the entirety of your season. You're always going to need these. These are your necessary but a pain items. Let's get into it. Starting with Heart and Bone. Heart and Bone is typically found through killing Marauders or killing Rattlers. Mostly killing Marauders. I do not know the actual drop rates of both, but I've typically found them from only killing Rattlers and Marauders. These are used in the creation of blue armor, and you're always going to want them because you're always going to want blue armor, unless you're happening to kill a bunch of people that are wearing blue armor consistently. You're going to have to make your own. Next, we've got the Rattler Head. Now, the Rattler Head used to be super difficult to find. It used to be one of those items that had such a low drop rate that we didn't even know if it existed. The reality is, it's useful. It's kind of in that same boat a little with the Strider Head, but it's used for better items. But when it comes to if you should be picking them up all the time, no. You are going to want them all the time, though, because of what they are used for. They're used in the creation of specific helmets. I can't remember if it's. I think it's blue. Yes, it is. It is blue. I don't know why my brain was futzing out there for a little bit. I believe it is blue that it's used for. I'd have to check on that one, but that's not the point. You're gonna want you're gonna want the Rattler Heads. Moving on, we've got the Poison Gland. Now, Poison Glands you can only get from killing ticks. Yay! Here's the problem: they don't drop it all the time, like at all. It is a super low drop chance. If you find a toxic gland or poison gland, pick it up. You're going to want it. They are specifically used in Osiris quests. Simple as that. Pick them up, move on with your day. The Rattler skin, also super useful. It is used in the creation of, I believe, green armor. Man, I might be getting all of these wrong. What type of cycle YouTuber am I? Oof. Anyway, moving forward, they are definitely using the creation of armor, and it is something that you are desperately going to need to have all the time, as white armor, as the season goes on, is going to become more and more obsolete to the point where people are going to be using cores and KAs and just one-shotting you if you've got the Nublet gear. So, the electric cable, or the electric coil, as some people, I think it's actually called in game, is super useful mid and late game. If you're picking it up early game, you will thank yourself later. And the reality for that, it is used quite a bit in ICA contracts as well. It is used pretty regularly in base construction. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it. We'll move on. Shock absorbers, or as Rumble, well, if you haven't seen the video, you should. Rumble has a enjoyment with the shock absorber. The shock absorbers are specifically items that are used for attachments. I haven't seen any other use besides attachments, but in the creation of purple attachments, such as the armor penetrating ones, the ones that help with the penetration of ammo, you always want them. And the shock absorbers, perfect for it. Perfect. Moving on to scrap metal. Now, scrap metal is going to be one of those things that early game, you just can't get enough of. You're always going to need scrap metal, and for whatever reason, it's super difficult to find. You could go to Crescent Falls and get scrap metal, but as a nooblet, it's a bad idea. You're gonna die. I'm not going to guarantee you're going to die, because you might be able to rat your way through, but there are so many mobs, and if you're new to the game or you're just dropping with nooblet gear, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time. So you're probably going to stay on bright sands, in which case scrap metal is just difficult to find. I'm going to skip over the obvious one here for a second and move on into pure focus crystals. So pure focus crystals can be found wherever you can find normal focus crystals, whether that be in the abandoned mine on bright sands or, the jungle area. If you can mine an area for focus crystals, you have a chance of finding the pure focus crystals. Now, pure focus crystals are typically used in a lot of Korolev missions. So they're not necessarily super useful when it comes to the creation of attachments, but because they're used in the higher level Korolev missions, the XP that you get from those contracts is worth it. But they also are still kind of difficult to find unless and you will have to do specific drops just to find focus. Now let's move on to the elephant in the room. The smart mesh. I'm not saying that it's a okay thing to shoot your comrade in the back for smart mesh. What I am going to say, though, is that if you happen to accidentally misfire your weapon and your friend accidentally happens to get foamed because of it, you might as well take the smart mesh just in case, right? You don't want it going to work. Smart mesh, for whatever reason, is one of the most difficult items to find right now. It is used in a lot of the important upgrades for the player quarters, specifically inventory. Specifically, the safe pouch. The first upgrade requires 4 smart meshes, and then there's another upgrade at some point. I don't know if it's in the inventory or generator. I believe it's the inventory that requires 32 smart mesh. Jaeger, please fix that. That's awful. Holy crap. Anyway, moving forward. So if you find smart mesh, don't shout it out on the off chance your partner accidentally misfires into your back. Finally, we have our last tier, the necessary, useful, and should pick up. Let's start at the top. You've got the spinal base. Spinal bases are going to be useful throughout your entire season because they're used in the beginning of the game, middle of the game, and end of the game because they are used so often in contracts, specifically ICA and Osiris missions, but as well, they are used pretty frequently throughout the entirety of the quarter upgrades. The thing is, because they drop so frequently, because you basically get them whenever you kill a mob, the base upgrades require you to use somewhere like 12, 13, 14, 15 for one upgrade. So it's a little, you're like, oh, I already have so many. And then you do one upgrade and you realize, oh God, they're all gone. One of the ICA missions that I know super well, because I had to do it so often, was, kill 20 mobs, but turn in 15 spinal bases. Like, that's a lot when you're not paying attention to it. Anyway, there you go. Moving forward, we've got the 2 access keys, the 2 key cards. So key cards are super, super useful because it helps you get into the locked rooms, as you've probably seen throughout your entire time playing Fortuna. Something to note here really quickly, though, is that the yellow banner and the blue banner actually do stand for something. The yellow banner stands for Bright Sands. The blue banner stands for Crescent Falls. So those keys go to those specific maps. As well, I always recommend picking up duplicates because they can be used as bartering or, let's just say somebody in a yellow trench coat comes up to you and goes, hey, give me your key cards and I won't, shoot. I'm not saying I would do that. That's awful. I don't know what other person in a yellow trench coat there is, but that's not the point. If you happen to see someone in a yellow trench coat and they politely ask, using diplomacy, to give you a key card, I recommend giving it. Anyway, moving on, we've got the metallic alloys. Now, metallic alloys are going to be super useful throughout your entire run as well because they are used so frequently for purple attachments. And contracts. Mostly for the purple attachments, though. But they are also used pretty frequently for contracts. That's about it. We'll move on to the ball bearings, the compound sheets, the derelict explosives, and the hydraulic press. Basically. All 4 of these are used very heavily in Korolev contracts. They are used all the time. As well, the last 3 that I mentioned are used pretty frequently in the purple attachments creation as well, and you're always going to want the purple attachments. Pretty much simple as that. Then you've got the print resin. Now, print resin is one of those weird things where you're like, well, why are you putting it in necessary, useful, and should pick up? And the reason for that is because it is used in, I believe, some of the more powerful purple attachments, that being the penetration ammo stuff. You desperately want those attachments. Like, your game will change when you start using those. The same concept goes for the shard splicer. The shard splicer as well, though, is used in contracts, but it's used in the purple attachments. Let's move on. I also realized I am actually missing one item, but we'll get to that in a hot second. The textiles is the next one. Textiles are super, super useful, and you're going to always want to pick them up whenever you can, simply out of the fact that they are used in the creation of blue and purple backpacks. That's all there is to say for it. We'll move on. Finally, we've got the last 3 minerals: brittle titan ore, nickel ore, and altered nickel ore. All 3 of these are used in crafting, are used in contracts, and are used in base creation or base upgrade. They're just standard. They're super useful to find. Super easy to find. And as well, they will be useful as well. Like, that's just the reality. But keeping in mind that if you happen to be killing a lot of nooblets, they're probably going to have the minerals on them. So walking loot bag, maybe? The final thing that I don't know how I missed putting it here on the tier list, but it should be in T1, necessary, useful, should pick up, is insulation, which you'll obviously see here on screen. Now, insulation is absolutely vital because 4 of them help you create the green bag. That's it. That's all it's used for. But you always want to be picking it up because you never want to have the white bag. Once you have moved on and you're in like mid-level or even high level, using a white bag is just painful. It's painful. You at minimum want to have the green bag. Without further ado, everyone, that is going to be it for today's tier list. Remember that once the game officially releases, I will update this tier list as so. In any case, everyone, thank you all very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you got the comment section down below. You can do that. I'm usually pretty responsive. Or, join the Discord. Pretty responsive there. You can send a DM. If you want to see more videos like this, more information-based videos, and what you want to see in those as well, boom, comments down below. And in any case, thank you all for watching. My name is the Son of Morning. You've all been absolutely fantastic, and we will see you next time.